So this past weekend, NBA free agency happened, and we were looking for all these big contracts coming out of nowhere. First thing that comes to mind with NBA free agency this past weekend was Gordon Hayward signing with the Charlotte Hornets. We mentioned it in our draft special. Man, that man got paid, and he was like the fourth or fifth option in Boston. He is now one of the top two options, arguably, in Charlotte. Um, Edward, how does this change the Charlotte Hornets team?
So it's a very interesting. He was a good player in Jazz. I really liked him. That 20-point scorer, just easy buckets. And then he went to the Celtics, and everyone was like, "Oh, dude, this team is going to be stacked." But he had that horrific injury. I remember watching that night. It was just, it gouged me out. And then he wasn't the same player. And yeah, I could definitely see that. So now going to the Hornets, just to ease off some pressure. It'll be very interesting. I think it's a good pickup. Just I don't know about the money, but as a player, I think it's a good pickup because they need a guy who could spray on the wing. It can't just be Graham. It just can't be LaMelo now. So I think that solved their 3 or 4 spot right there.
Yep, and the Hornets definitely we can argue that they overpaid. 4 years, 120 million is a lot. Gabe, do you think that they overpaid? And if so, how much do you think he should have gotten? How much is he worth?
Well, I think he was overpaid in the sense that his stock is not as high as his production. But I do think, and I'll talk about that a little more later into this take, but I do think that he's a great fit for Charlotte. And if all goes well, then yeah, he can be that second scorer, maybe even first scorer for this year that Charlotte needs and that maybe he needs to lift up his stock. He can maybe go back to being an all-star even because of how weak the East is. I know it gets slightly stronger every year, especially with LeBron being out west, scaring boys to the East. But on the flip side, if you want to talk about them overpaying for a perimeter guy that's later into his career, still looks okay, but might drop off, just look what they did a few years ago with Nicholas Batum. So that's a little concerning. I know they play differently, but their skill level was around the same at the time of their signings. And Nicholas Batum got, I think, 5 years, 110 or 5 years, 120 even. Gordon Hayward getting paid $30 million is very concerning, but there aren't too many big-name free agents that might want to go to Charlotte, with all due respect to Hornets fans. So it's all about time, honestly. Anyone could say that it's a terrible signing, but it is a good fit, so we'll just have to see.
Yeah, I'm rooting for all these small market teams because it's tough for them to attract those big free agents. And when you get picks or if you get someone like Gordon Hayward, then you can't blame the Hornets organization because they definitely could use an upgrade like Gordon Hayward. He did produce in the playoffs. He did have some valuable minutes off the bench when he came back, but it's just a matter of health with him and a matter of whether he can fit into this team moving forward. Okay, another big free agency move was Montrezl Harrell to the Lakers. This is the sixth man of the year. Edward, you're a Lakers fan. I'm going to just let you talk. How did you feel about Trez going to the Lakers?
I thought it was fake, to be honest. I thought it was fake news. But I trust those. When I saw who posted, I was like, oh, so this is legit. I was kind of surprised. I thought he was staying in the Clippers, and my thought is I thought we were gonna resign everyone, but Rondo going, Avery Bradley's going, Dwight Howard. I don't want to talk about him right now. But replacing Dwight Howard with Montrezl Harrell, yeah, his bubble wasn't the best, but remember we have to put it in perspective that his grandma passed away, and he's that emotional guy. So, and that's feel his game. So him not being there is hard, but I think playing with LeBron, he feels like, oh yeah, I'm ready to go to work. And we could talk about that Patrick Beverly tweet, but I think it's a great pickup because how he bullied Anthony Davis made him work, and him playing with him, that small ball lineup is going to be very dangerous.
Yeah, I can just feel like the tension even growing past what it was last year between the Lakers and the Clippers. I can't imagine what a game will look like in December between these two teams. If Harrell doesn't win the finals this year, if the Clippers end up winning, Harrell's going to feel like an idiot, obviously, and people have been saying that. But Gabe, do you have any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, going off of that, after Harrell left the Clippers, and basically their only big men were Zubac and Patterson, they basically had to sign Serge Ibaka. If Serge Ibaka didn't go there, they were left with like DeMarcus Cousins and Marcus Gasol. And DeMarcus Cousins could be great, but he has a very high risk game right now because of his injury history. He tore his ACL and his Achilles. Marcus Gasol is almost 40 years old now. The Clippers basically had to sign Serge Ibaka once Harrell left.
Yeah, and the thing I like about Serge Ibaka compared to Harrell is that Serge Ibaka is a shooter. He can shoot the ball better than Harrell can. He can shoot from the perimeter. We saw him with the Raptors. And he can also score in the paint if you need him to. He's not as dominant of a force as Harrell is, but he can definitely give them those buckets that are much needed as like a third or fourth option, I guess, on the Clippers. But, especially when Kawhi and PG aren't going the way they're going, like in a Game 7 against the Nuggets, maybe Serge Ibaka can add to that and give some.
Yeah, Serge Ibaka was actually hitting some clutch buckets in the playoffs. I remember he hit like 4 or 5 shots in a row, and the announcers couldn't even believe it because it's like out of all the players on the Raptors, Serge Ibaka is the one with the hot streak. But yeah, you forget that he has a great offensive game. It's all about his defense, but he's got some offense too.
Yeah, so that could definitely be a subtle free agent signing that could do wonders. Okay, Christian Wood to the Rockets. How did you feel about that, Gabe? You were focusing on those Rockets moves.
Yeah, I was focusing on those moves because once Daryl Morey left, it was basically him giving up on that only small ball idea that he had. It was very improvised. I'm not sure that it really gave the owners the best impression of him. Morey is a genius, but they realized that was a flawed style of thinking, that you can't have a big man. Look at the 2 teams in the finals. You need big men on your team, at least to be able to compete like that. So these were 2 great pickups. DeMarcus Cousins, obviously, like I said, he's very high risk, but he's also high reward too at the same time. On a team like that has Russell Westbrook and James Harden beefing, and maybe even one of them being traded any given day now or staying on the team, those 2 signings are good leverage to maybe keep them around. Once they traded Robert Covington, you thought maybe they were going to blow up their entire team. But Christian Wood, he was averaging around 20 and 10 after the trade deadline when Andre Drummond left the Pistons. It was only like a 13-game span, but that's very promising. And DeMarcus Cousins could maybe even average 20 and 10 if Christian Wood and DeMarcus Cousins switch roles. So those are some super clutch signings and kind of give Russell Westbrook and James Harden just a tad bit of hope.
Yeah, and DeMarcus Cousins is a wild card, right? But if he can be what he was in Sacramento, maybe that's really hard to happen. That it's really hard for that to happen. But DeMarcus Cousins, we forget what he was in Sacramento because it's just been so long, so many years of being out due to injury with the Warriors, Pelicans, and even Lakers, I think. It's tough for DeMarcus Cousins, but I keep thinking in my head, by the way, that James Harden is already off the Rockets, but he's not actually off the Rockets, and you kind of reminded me of that. So if this team stays together, they can go up with the best teams in the West. They have the talent, and big men, they changed the whole philosophy. You never know what you're going to get from the Rockets now.
Just remember one thing is we've heard all these reports about Westbrook and Harden, but neither of them have confirmed it, and they've called BS on it. So it's really just speculation. But yeah, I mean it's warranted speculation, but we don't know if it's true.
For sure. One of the last few free agent signings that I wanted to talk about, other than the players who stayed with their teams, such as Fred VanVleet staying with the Raptors, which is kind of big for the Raptors. And then also, Rondo goes to the Hawks, but we'll see what the Hawks are this year. The Hawks have some good acquisitions. They got Danilo Gallinari as well. How do we see the Hawks shaping up with Rondo, Gallinari, Trae Young, and we already mentioned in our draft special their pick? Edward, how do you feel about this Hawks team moving forward?
Oh man, they look dangerous. Also they might even have Bogdanovich, so that's another good pickup. And their centers, I hope what it's going to be very questionable what they're going to do about Clint. But Onake Onwaku, that
Wow.
center, just he's a great pickup. I put him as a 2 in my mock draft because he is that guy he is that definition of a small ball center too. He plays so well in USC. I saw his stats, and he just reminds me of like a miniature DeAndre Jordan. Just him just running down the floor and just playing good defense, just everything like that. Just hope. I don't know how good his shooting is. So let's see about that. But I mean, his upside is very good, and I think him playing in the transition with the Hawks, especially with Trae Young pick and roll, is just going to be very dangerous. And I think Rondo is a good mentor to Trae Young. I mean, if you could do that with the Lakers, then I could see definitely with the Hawks. So it's going to be they're a very dangerous team. I think they're going to be, if I had to predict, maybe 7 or 6, like the or we could go to 5 even.
Yeah, we don't know what to expect. We'll probably have predictions coming on soon. Last free agency deal that I wanted to mention, Tristan Thompson to the Celtics. I think Thompson getting out of Cleveland is good for him, but it's also good for the Celtics. I didn't really watch much of Tristan Thompson this past year because nobody watches the Cavaliers anymore. But I think from what we saw Tristan Thompson in as with LeBron and then sort of a little bit after LeBron, I think he's still got some value left in him as a player. And the Celtics could use a big man. They were running on Daniel Tice for most of those playoffs. And Daniel Tice is, you can say what you want about Daniel Tice, but Tristan Thompson is not Daniel Tice. Tristan Thompson is arguably more dominant than Daniel Tice, especially on defense. So the Celtics match up well. Obviously, you keep Jason Tatum with a contract worth up to $195 million. I think the Celtics will definitely just be back in the mix with the East next year.